All right, welcome to week 9. We are now coming up to Robertson's narrative of our immediate lifetimes. Robertson discusses the public policy challenges related to climate change at the start of this text. How does Robertson characterize the conflicts over the Obama administration's attempt to use executive power to enact his clean power plan? Why are these fights so contentious? Related question, to what extent does Justice John Paul Stevens' majority opinion in Massachusetts versus EPA demonstrate how federalism complicates the attempt to maintain national policy on the environment? A big part of Robertson's narrative of recent American politics is the resurgence of conservatism, beginning with Reagan. What is the significance of Ronald Reagan's decision to launch his campaign at the Neshoba County Fair near Philadelphia, Mississippi, where segregationists had killed 3 civil rights workers 15 years earlier? Uh, One of Robertson's important points is that while Reagan spoke up on the value of federalism and argued that the federal government had grown too powerful, he adopted a distinctive view of federalism, which Robertson describes as competing sovereigns. What is the significance of this notion of competing sovereigns, and to what extent is it sort of introducing into our view of federalism a greater level of competition between the two levels of government? And what does that suggest about sort of the ability of American federalism to adapt without just producing sort of an infinite regress of conflict? To me, an interesting question is how consistently Reagan and Reaganism acted with regard to federalism. Did Republicans, when they won arguments in this period, consistently seek to return power to the states? Now, as Emerson once said, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of mediocre minds, of statesmen, soldiers, and divines. But, we should ask ourselves, how important is this notion of consistency in evaluating public policy? Um, an important issue that Robertson addresses in this period is the idea of unfunded mandates. What is the origin of unfunded mandates? Why is it so controversial? Why do unfunded mandates create so many challenges for state and local government? What do you think we ought to do about unfunded mandates? If you don't like them, how do you get rid of them? Because it seems like both sides have used unfunded mandates quite aggressively when they want to really get things done. Another thing I like about Robertson's narrative of this period is the way that Bill Clinton reacted to losing Congress in 1994, adopting what Robertson describes as executive federalism. What does he mean by executive federalism? Was Clinton, a former governor himself, in some ways more attentive to federalism as a governing principle than his Republican predecessors and successor? I think it's also useful to look at the administration of George W. Bush and Barack Obama side by side when you're reviewing this material. How did one of George W. Bush's signature first-term achievements, No Child Left Behind, conform to Federalist principles? How did Barack Obama's signature achievement, the Affordable Care Act, embody the norms of federalism? If you look objectively at the behavior of the two administrations, you have to conclude that Democratic presidents in this period have tended to take federalism more seriously, while Republicans have tended to espouse federalism in principle, but jettison it whenever they really wanted something done where federalism might provide a basis for opposition. Obviously, if you don't agree, fine, take me on. I'm up to the fight. One of the main consequences of the resurgence of the states as co-equal players in our constitutional system is that control of state governments has increasingly become a much more consequential issue. Correspondingly, you're seeing much more intense competition for state legislatures and governors' mansions than in the past. Republicans stole a march on Democrats in 2010 with the Red Map project, investing hundreds of millions of dollars in winning control of state legislative and gubernatorial elections. That enabled them to win an unprecedented number of state legislative seats and governorships. And with the control that they had, they heavily gerrymandered the federal House of Representative maps on a state-by-state basis. 2010 was when they did this. That was a census year. 2020 is coming up. Where did all that spare money come from? I would love to know that. I say all this merely to highlight something that Robertson is pointing out in the text. The control of state governments is increasingly becoming a key battleground in the ideological fight for partisan control of government. And that hyperpartisanship is effectively pushing downward from the federal to the state level. One last observation about this chapter, and can I just say I really love this book, it's really good, is what Richard Nathan in the text, Robertson cites him as talking about the paradox of devolution. What exactly is he talking about? What is the significance of this paradox for understanding where we are today regarding federalism and intergovernmental relations? And what are some of the pathways, likely pathways forward? The rest of this chapter deals with specific issues like poverty, education, and environmental policy, and how federalism and the culture wars have interacted with one another to muddle our public policies on these issues. Education in particular is a hobby horse of mine, so if anyone wants to debate the relative merits of vouchers or anything else, that's fine by me. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to throw them out there. And let's have a good discussion this week.